Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 15th, 2021. Last week we discussed several aspects of the Jewish law judicial system. What about in Israel today? What is the role of Jewish law in Israel today? So this is a gigantic subject. It is deserving of a series of full lectures. I will just point out very briefly the elements of the subject that would need to be discussed in a fuller discussion. The state of Israel is a secular country with a secular judicial system. Israeli law primarily is based on British law, Turkish law, and American law. There are some groups of Jews who are terribly upset, and they were disappointed that this happened. They expected over the last 2,000 years of exile that when there would be a modern state of Israel, it would be run entirely based on Jewish law. And as a result of that, this is the major basis of those groups of Haredim, certain groups of Hasidim and others, who call themselves anti-Zionist or non-Zionist and don't recognize the authority of the state because it's not based exclusively on Torah law, but on secular law. This again is deserving of a very full treatment, but just to say, mainstream orthodoxy vigorously separates ourselves from that opinion of those groups, and we disagree with them 1,000%. However, the secular leaders at the founding of the State of Israel agreed to a compromise, and that is that marriage and divorce would be under Jewish law. So in Israel, there are separate courts for marriage and divorce that are separate from the rest of the Israeli system. They are part of Israeli law subject to Israeli legislation, but they are run by Batei Din, Bet Din Jewish law courts, with rabbis who have the qualifications of being a member of a Bet Din. And this was and is very controversial. It is one of the causes of the deep rifts in Israeli society between religious and non-religious Jews today, and it is something that is highly, highly problematic. There are, of course, private Jewish courts, Bet Dins, just like there are here and around the world, and like here, for civil matters of a dispute between two Jewish parties, it is the preferable thing for both sides to take their dispute to Bet Din. That's the preferable thing, so that a case between two Jews, preferably, should be adjudicated by Jewish law, if it is a kind of a case where that can happen. And that is true even if in the Israeli court, the Israeli judge is Jewish, even if that judge is a religious Jew, still that is not Jewish law, but it is secular law, and therefore the issue of turning to a secular court applies just as much if the judge he or herself is Jewish or religious. It's still within a secular legal system. That issue still applies. Israeli law and the decisions of Israeli courts must be followed, just like Quebec law and the decisions of Quebec courts, based on the principle of Dina de Malchus Dina. The law of the land is the law. Israelis are obligated to follow Israeli law. Doesn't mean they agree with it, but they have to follow it. There is a minority view that dina nemachusa dina, the law of the land is applicable law, does not apply in Israel. Now, that is a minority view. It is not the accepted halacha, and therefore, a Jewish person, has no right to rely on that, and, as I said a moment ago, is bound by Israeli law and Israeli court decisions. It is true that there are some Jews who use this as an excuse, as a rationalization for not following an Israeli law to say, oh, I'm not covered by it. But that's all it is. It's a rationalization, it's an excuse, and it does not have validity in Jewish law. A person who violates Israeli law, a person who disregards an Israeli court decision, is in violation of this very serious principle of dina nemachusa dina. There is an effort going back decades to try to incorporate Jewish law into secular Israeli law. And there are many, many scholars who discuss if that's a good thing, which is not at all obvious, and then, if it is something to be desired, how and when it could be done. Over the years, many laws have been passed allowing for consulting Jewish law under certain circumstances. Just as one example, several years ago, Knesset passed legislation that if there is a case of civil law that has no legal precedent in British or Turkish law, so that means there's a lacuna in the law, there's a vacuum where there is no direct law that applies to this case, then the law should be decided based on halacha, based on Jewish law. And in fact, there is a machon, an institute within the secular Ministry of Justice. There's an institute of scholars who studies Jewish law in order to present in a very clear and accessible manner how different areas of Jewish law could be incorporated or applied in secular cases relating, for example, to partnerships or to damages or to real estate. So this is an effort that goes on. And there are many eminent scholars and jurists who are active in this subject. And there is one towering figure, stands head and shoulders above everyone else in this subject, and that is Menachem Elon of blessed memory. Menachem Elon was a monumental and magnificent figure in modern Israeli life. Among his many achievements in many areas, he was a first-rate legal scholar. He was also a first-rate Talmudic scholar. He was a Talmid Chacham. And he served on the Israeli Supreme Court from 1977 to 1993. He passed away in 2013. And I would urge you to learn more about this remarkable person, to get an idea of what it could mean for Jewish law to be more incorporated into Israeli law, because he's the one who wrote the blueprint for how it happens. Many of his Supreme Court decisions, and again, talking about in the secular Israeli Supreme Court, many of his Supreme Court decisions, and remember also, Israeli Supreme Court decisions are the final arbiter of secular Israeli law. His were based on principles and sources in classical Talmudic law. Anyone who is interested in this subject, could Jewish law have more of a place in Israeli law? Here is the blueprint for answering that question. This is one of the works written by Elon, titled Jewish Law, Cases and Materials. Yes, it is a textbook used in law school, and it is fascinating reading for anyone who cares about Jewish law in the modern period. It is the blueprint for how this might work. Because what he does is, he includes in this volume a wide range of his actual cases and decisions while he was sitting as a justice in the Israeli Supreme Court, where he ruled primarily based on Jewish law and sources in classical Jewish law. Now, of course, he was one of several judges. Sometimes the other justices agreed with his opinion. Sometimes they dissented, and he includes that information as well. But the range of cases that are covered just in this volume, which of course is only a small number of the total range of cases, the range of cases is immense. Every possible area of law is considered. Just to give you a short idea of the kinds of cases included in this volume are cases that relate to illegal contracts, interpretation of documents, damages for defamation, circumstantial evidence in criminal trials, admissibility of confessions, adoption, abortion, lost and found property, human rights, objections to military service, prisoners' rights, euthanasia, genetic engineering, abortion, and many, many other subjects. After Justice Elon left the court, the Israeli Supreme Court swung away from this approach, rejecting the use of Jewish law sources to decide secular cases. And today, the pendulum swings back and forth. I would say today it's somewhere in the middle. But the subject and the effort of trying to incorporate Jewish law in some ways into secular Jewish law is alive and well and enjoys extensive debate on all sides by scholars who are first-rate in both fields. And again, if it is to happen, or to the extent to which it happened, it will be based on the shoulders of Menachem Elon. My friends, I want to wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing all of you soon in person.